up the chain to President Trump, he became frustrated and he replaced the campaign's legal team. Let's play clip 14.
You know, I think the president, it was during the second week where things like you displayed were occurring, where he was growing increasingly unhappy with his team, me, less so because I was less involved at this point, but still me, growing increasingly unhappy with Justin Clark, and that kind of, paved the way for, Justin to be moved out and be moved in as the person in charge of, the legal side of the campaign, and for all intents and purposes, the campaign.
Now, when Mr. Stepien became campaign manager, he was the second Trump campaign manager for the 2020 race, and there were only about 115 days until Election Day. So let's play the video.
I inherited a campaign that was, the day I was hired, was like President Trump's low point in the 2020 daily average polling against President Biden. It was a campaign at a low point in the polls. It was structurally and fiscally efficient. There was a great deal wrong with the campaign in both of those areas. So most of my day spent fixing and I think I took over with 115 days left in the campaign. Most of my time was spent fixing the things that could be fixed with 115 days left in the campaign.
Now, Mr. Stepien has been in the campaign field for a long time, and he worked for lots of different candidates and campaigns. He testified to this committee about his concerns given the claims that Mr. Giuliani and Ms. Powell and their team were making.
Welcome aboard, Captain.
Okay, and was it important for you, Mr. Stepien, to sort of pull back just for your own professional reputation? You didn't want to be associated with some of what you were hearing from the Giuliani team and others that sort of stepped in the wake of your departure?
I didn't mind being categorized. There were two groups. We called them kind of my team and Marty's team. I didn't mind being characterized as being part of Team Normal, as the reporters, kind of started to do around that point in time. I said, hours ago, early on, that I've been doing this for a long time, 25 years, and I've spanned, political ideologies from Trump to McCain to Bush to Christie, and I can work under a lot of circumstances
Passing
for a lot of
100
varied,
meters. Oxygen
candidates and
efficiency
politicians.
decreased.
Situation where, and I think along the way I built up a pretty good, I hope, a good reputation for being honest and professional, and I didn't think what was happening was necessarily honest or professional. So that led to me stepping away.
So the president did get rid of Team Normal, and I'd like to play a clip showing that the president found the people he needed and his claims.
New blueprint acquired.
They saw a big truck bringing in 100,000 ballots in garbage cans, in waste paper baskets, in cardboard boxes, and in shopping baskets. And every single one of them was provided because they were being notified by Smartmatic in Frankfurt that Biden was way behind. They better come up with a lot more ballots, and we can prove every single thing I just said. I gave you the paper ballots. I could probably turn around each one of these things. I'm absolutely convinced if you let me examine each one of those ballots and pull out enough that were fraudulent, that it would shake the hell out of the country.
it can set and run an algorithm that probably ran all over the country to take a certain percentage of votes from President Trump and flip them to President Biden, which we might never have uncovered had the votes for President Trump not been so overwhelming in so many of these states that it broke the algorithm.
I remember that one of the things Mark said at some point was, you can't show an actual vote was flipped, which I found at the time to be a remarkable assertion, because you don't have to have the gun to see the body lying on the floor bleeding out with 5 bullet holes in it was killed by a gun.
What they were proposing, I thought was nuts. And the theory was also completely nuts, right? I mean, it was a combination of Italians and Germans. I mean, different things have been floating around as to who was involved. Remember, Hugo Chavez and the Venezuelan, she has an affidavit from somebody who says they wrote a software in, and something with the Philippines, and just all over the radar.
Did you ever share, Mr. Kushner, your view of Mr. Giuliani? Did you ever share your perspective about him with the president?
I guess yes.
Tell me what you said.
Basically, not the approach I would take if I was you.
Okay, and how did he react? How did President Trump react when you shared that view with him?
Said, I have confidence in Rudy.
I think I had conversations with probably all of our council who were signed up to assist on election day as they disengaged with the campaign. The general consensus was that law firms were not comfortable making the arguments that Rudy Giuliani was making publicly. I seem to recall that I had a similar conversation with most all of them.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, I didn't want to be a part of it, and that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did.
Even Sidney Powell, defending herself in a defamation lawsuit brought by Dominion Voting Systems, argued that, quote, no reasonable person would conclude that her statements were truly statements of fact. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the witness for joining us today. The first panel is now dismissed. Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, we presented the testimony of former Attorney General Bill Barr, who testified before this committee. Today, we present additional evidence, including his testimony that former President Trump started making claims of election fraud immediately after the election, and that Barr concluded the claims were untrue. Now, due to the length of Attorney General Barr's testimony, we're only going to include relevant portions at the hearing today. So let's play the video.
The department, in fact, when we received specific and credible allegations of fraud, made an effort to look into these to satisfy ourselves that they were without merit. And I was in the posture of trying to figure out, there was an avalanche of all these allegations of fraud that built up over a number of days, and it was like playing whack-a-mole because something would come out one day and then the next day it would be another issue. Also, I was influenced by the fact that all the early claims that I understood were completely bogus and silly and usually based on complete misinformation. And so I didn't consider the quality of claims right out of the box to give me any feeling that there was really substance here.
For the first time since the election, the Attorney General spoke personally with the President on November 23rd, and this was at the White House. Let's play the video, please.
So on November 23rd, I hadn't spoken to the President since the election, and in fact, as I said, since the middle of October, roughly. And it was a little getting awkward because obviously he had lost the election and I hadn't said anything to him. And so Cipollone said, I think it's time you come over here. And so I came over to meet with the President in the Oval Office, and Meadows and Cipollone were there. And the President, and this is leading up to this conversation with Kushner, the President said there had been major fraud, and that as soon as the facts were out, the results of the election would be reversed. And he went on this for quite a while, as he's prone to do. And then he got to something that I was expecting, which is to say that apparently the Department of Justice doesn't think that it has a role of looking into these fraud claims. So I said, that has to be the campaign that raises that with the state. The department doesn't take sides in elections, and the department is not an extension of your legal team. And our role is to investigate fraud, and we'll look at something if it's specific, credible, and could have affected the outcome of the election. And we're doing that, and it's just not. They're just not meritorious. They're not panning out. And as I walked out of the Oval Office, Jared was there with Dan Scavino, who ran the President's social media, and who I thought was a reasonable guy and believe is a reasonable guy. And I said, how long is he going to carry on with this stolen election stuff? Where's this going to go? And by that time, Meadows had caught up with me, and leaving the office, and caught up with me and said that he said, look, I think that he's becoming more realistic and knows that there's a limit to how far he can take this. And then Jared said, yeah, we're working on this. We're working on it.
Even after his Attorney General told him his claims of election fraud were false, President Trump continued to promote these claims.
I felt that things continued to deteriorate between the 23rd and the weekend of the 29th. And then on November 29th, he appeared on Maria Bartiromo's show, Sunday Futures, I believe it was. And he said that the department was missing in action.
Well, no, we had glitches where they moved thousands of votes from my account to Biden's account. And these are glitches. So they're not glitches, they're theft. They're fraud, absolute fraud. This election was over, and then they did dumps. They call them dumps, big, massive dumps. In Michigan and Pennsylvania and all over. How the FBI and Department of Justice, I don't know, maybe they're involved, but how people are allowed to get away from this stuff with this stuff is unbelievable.
Now, spurred by what he saw, Barr told the Associated Press on December 1st that there was no evidence of election fraud. And immediately after Attorney General Barr's statement went public, Mr. Trump berated and he nearly fired Barr. But Barr persisted in telling the president that there was no evidence to support the fraud claims.
This got under my skin, but I also felt it was time for me to say something. So I set up a lunch with the AP reporter, Mike Balsamo, and I told him at lunch, I made this statement, that to date we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. I had a later meeting scheduled at the White House at 3 o'clock with Meadows. This was previously scheduled, so I knew this was going to come up, and I went over there and I told my secretary that I thought I would probably be fired and told not to go home. I mean, not to go back to my office. So I said, you might have to pack up for me. And so when I got over there, I met with the chief of staff. He said the president was angry. He didn't really get into the issue of the fraud. And then I went up to Pat Cipolloni's office, and we were talking with each other. And word came down that he wanted us both to go to the Oval. And the president was as mad as I've ever seen him, and he was trying to control himself. And the president said, well, this is, killing me. You didn't have to say this. You must have said this because you hate Trump. You hate Trump. And then he raised the big vote dump, as he called it, in Detroit. And that, he said people saw boxes coming into the counting station at all hours of the morning and so forth. And I explained to him that at that point I knew the exact number of precincts in Detroit. I think it was 630 something. I said, Mr. President, there are 630 precincts in Detroit, and unlike elsewhere in the state, they centralized the counting process. So they're not counted in each precinct. They're moved to counting stations. And so the normal process would involve boxes coming in at all different hours. So there's nothing. And I said, did anyone point out to you, did all the people complaining about it point out to you, you actually did better in Detroit than you did last time? I mean, there's no indication of fraud in Detroit. And I told him that the stuff that his people were shoveling out to the public was bullshit. I mean, that the claims of fraud were bullshit. And
can't do shit today.
He was indignant about that. And I reiterated that they'd wasted a whole month on these claims on the Dominion voting machines, and they were idiotic claims. And I specifically raised the Dominion voting machines, which I found to be among the most disturbing allegations. Disturbing in the sense that I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations, but they were made in such a sensational way that they obviously were influencing a lot of people, members of the public, that there was this systemic corruption in the system and that their votes didn't count and that these machines controlled by somebody else were actually determining it, which was complete nonsense. And it was being laid out there, and I told them that it was crazy stuff, and they were wasting their time on that. And it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
Okay, so the very next day, the president released a video rehashing some of the very same claims that his chief law enforcement officer had told him were, quote, nonsense.
Here's an example. This is Michigan. At 6:31 in the morning, a vote dump of 149,772 votes came in unexpectedly. We were winning by a lot. That batch was received in horror. We have a company that's very suspect. Its name is Dominion. With the turn of a dial or the change of a chip, you could press a button for Trump and the vote goes to Biden. What kind of a system is this?
Barr again told the president that there was nothing to these claims before December 14th.
When I walked in, sat down, he went off on a monologue saying that there was now definitive evidence involving fraud through the Dominion machines, and a report had been prepared by a very reputable cybersecurity firm, which he identified as Allied Security Operations Group, when he held up the report, and then he asked that a copy of it be made for me. And while a copy was being made, he said, this is absolute proof that the Dominion machines were rigged. The report means that I'm going to have a second term. And then he gave me a copy of the report, and as he talked more and more about it, I sat there flipping through the report and looking through it. And to be frank, it looked very amateurish to me. Didn't have the credentials of the people involved, but I didn't see any real qualifications, and the statements were made very conclusory, like, these machines were designed to, engage in fraud or something to that effect, but I didn't see any supporting information for it. And I was somewhat demoralized because I thought, boy, if he really believes this stuff, he has, lost contact with he's become detached from reality if he really believes this stuff. On the other hand, when I went into this and would, tell him how crazy some of these allegations were, there was never an indication of interest in looking at some facts. My opinion then and my opinion now is that the election was not stolen by fraud. And I haven't seen anything since the election that changes my mind on that, including the 2,000 views.
Well, maybe you can assess that 2,000 views since people are talking about that.
Well, I mean, just in a nutshell, I just think that the GBI was unimpressed
Vital
with it.
signs
And I was similarly unimpressed with it because I think I was holding my fire on that to see what the photographic evidence was, because for a long time, they have a lot of photographs of the same person dumping a lot of ballots in different boxes. That's hard to explain. So I wanted to see what the photographic evidence was, but the cell phone data is singularly unimpressive. I mean, basically, if you take 2 million cell phones and figure out where they are physically in a big city like Atlanta or wherever, just by definition, you're going to find many hundreds of them have passed by and spent time in the vicinity of these boxes. And the premise that, if you go by a box, 5 boxes or whatever it is, that's a mule is just indefensible. By definition, you're going to have hundreds of this. I mean, I saw one contractor said, we figured out that our truck alone would account for 6 cell phone signals. This was some kind of contractor, and our route would take us by these things on a regular basis. So but then when the movie came out, I think the photographic evidence in it was completely I mean, there was a little bit of it, but it was lacking. It didn't establish widespread illegal harvesting. The other thing is people don't understand is that it's not clear that even if you can show harvesting, that changes the results of the election. The courts are not going to throw out votes and then figure out what votes were harvested and throw them out. It's still the burden on the challenging party to show that illegal votes were cast. Votes were the result of undue influence or bribes, or there was really, the person was non-compos mentis. But absent that evidence, I just didn't see courts throwing out votes anywhere. I felt that before the election, it was possible to talk sense to the president. And while you sometimes had to engage in, a big wrestling match with him, that it was possible to keep things on track. But I felt that after the election, he didn't seem to be listening. I didn't think it was. That I was inclined not to stay around if he wasn't listening to advice from me or his other cabinet secretaries.
So on December 14th, Barr quit. Now, the Attorney General wasn't the only person who told the president that his claims were false. Other officials and close advisors told him the same thing.
Other than try to justify the actual hypothetical, let me just say, there were instances where the president would say, people are telling me this, or I heard this, or I saw on television, this impropriety in an act over Pennsylvania or something. And we were in a position to say, how people have already looked at that, and we know that you're getting bad information, but that's not correct. is demonstrated to be correct. Department is bumped.
Month and a half or so after the election day, and at that meeting, various allegations of
Passing 100
fraud were
meters.
discussed.
Oxygen efficiency decreased.
And Eric, Pat,
New blueprint acquired.
told the group, the president included, that none of those allegations had been substantiated to the point where there could be a basis for any litigation challenge to the election.
President Trump's own vice president and his top advisors also knew that there wasn't evidence to support the claims that the president was making.
Anyone else other than Mr. Meadows who asked you about the status outside of your legal group, Mr. Morgan and the others you mentioned? Anyone else who asked you the status of what you were finding in your assessment of it?
Yes, sir.
Welcome aboard, Captain.
Who's that?
Peter Navarro.
When did you talk to Mr. Navarro?
Mid-November.
Around the same time as Mr. Meadows?
Yes, sir.
And tell me about that conversation.
I recall him asking me questions about Dominion and maybe some other categories of allegations of voter fraud. And I remember telling him that I didn't believe the Dominion allegations because I thought the hand recount in Georgia would resolve any issues with the technology problem and with Dominion or Dominion flipping votes. And I mentioned at that time that the CISA, Chris Krebs, had recently released a report saying that the election was secure. And I believe Mr. Navarro accused me of being an agent of the deep state working with Chris Krebs against the president. And I never took another phone call from Mr. Navarro.
Anyone else besides Mr. Meadows, Mr. Navarro, Mr. Hirschman that you had discussions with, inquiring about what you were finding in your review of the allegations that were pouring in?
I believe I had about a 15-second conversation with the vice president about it as well.
When was that?
During one of the visits to the White House. I don't know which one. I think it was the first one in November. I had met him briefly at the campaign, and he remembered me and saw me. And he asked what I was doing on the campaign, and I told him that, we were looking into some of the issues related to voter fraud. And he asked me, I don't remember his exact words, but he asked me if we were finding anything. And I said that I didn't believe we were finding it, or I was not personally finding anything sufficient to alter the results of the election. And he thanked me. That was our interaction.
At a later hearing, you'll hear live testimony from the former acting Deputy Attorney General of the Department of Justice, Rich Donahue. But now I'd like to play a portion of his testimony.
I tried to, again, put this in perspective and to try to put it in very clear terms to the president. And I said something to the effect of, sir, we've done dozens of investigations, hundreds of interviews. The major allegations are not supported by the evidence developed. We've looked at Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada. We're doing our job. Much of the info you're getting is false. And then I went into, for instance, this thing from Michigan, this report about 68% error rate. Reality is it was only 0.0063% error rate, less than 1 in 15,000. So the president accepted that. He said, okay, fine, but what about the others? And again, this gets back to the point that there were so many of these allegations that when you gave him a very direct answer on one of them, he wouldn't fight us on it, but he would move to another allegation. So then I talked about a little bit about the Pennsylvania truck driver. This is another allegation that had come up. And this claim was by a truck driver who believed, perhaps honestly, that he had transported an entire tractor-trailer truck full of pallets from New York to Pennsylvania. And this was, again, out there in the public and discussed. And I essentially said, look, we looked at that allegation. We looked at both ends, both the people who load the truck and the people who unload the truck. And that allegation was not supported by the evidence. Again, he said, okay. Then he said, no, I didn't mention that one. What about the others? And I said, okay, well, with regard to Georgia, we looked at the tape, we interviewed the witnesses. There is no suitcase. The president kept fixating on this suitcase that's larger than ballots. The suitcase was rolled out from under the table. And I said, no, sir, there is no suitcase. You can watch that video over and over. There is no suitcase. There is a wheeled bin where they carry the ballots. And that's just how they move ballots around that facility. There's nothing suspicious about that at all. I told them that there was no multiple scanning of the ballots. One part of that allegation was that they were taking one ballot and scanning it through 3 or 4 or 5 times to rack up votes, presumably for Vice President Biden. I told them that the video did not support that. Then he went off on double voting at the top of the next page. He said, dead people are voting. Indians are getting paid to vote. He meant people on Native American reservations. He said there's lots of fraud going on here. Told him flat out that much of the information he's getting is false and or just not supported by the evidence. We look at the allegations, but they don't pan out.
Mr. Barr and his advisors were not the only ones who determined that the president's allegations regarding Dominion voting machines were false. So, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record of this hearing reports issued by the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, otherwise known as CISA, that addressed and rejected the claims of manipulation of voting machines in the 2020 election.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also ask unanimous consent to include in the record a report prepared by the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee that disproved claims of election fraud in Michigan, as well as a statement by 59 of the country's leading election security scientists, noting the absence of any credible evidence that the 2020 election had been altered through technical compromise, and 5 other reports from organizations and individuals confirming there was no widespread fraud in the 2020 election or describing the spread of the former president's lies.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Pursuant to the order of the committee for today, the chair declares the committee in recess for a period of approximately 10 minutes.
Hmm?
acquired. New blueprint acquired.
Welcome aboard, Captain.
Passing 200 meters. Oxygen efficiency greatly decreased. New blueprint acquired. Passing 200 meters. Oxygen efficiency greatly decreased.
Warning, maximum depth reached. Hull damage imminent.
Detected volcanic activity and several unusual electromagnetic signatures in the region. Exercise caution when diving deeper. New blueprint acquired. partially translated broadcast.
9 new biological subjects designated. Mode. Hunting. Analyzing. Sharing subject locations with other agents.
Are you kidding me? Oh, I thought I had it all.
It may be prudent to separate work and leisure spaces to maximize productivity. Treat this space as your home, but never forget that it is not.
weak element on the Republican ticket. So that does not suggest that the election was stolen by fraud.
How about Pennsylvania and Bill McSwain? We were talking to the U.S.
I don't
Attorney.
fucking remember what I was doing.
Philadelphia about an alleged discrepancy between the number of absentee ballots
Some
issued
bullshit.
and the number of ballots.
Right. So that was one of the big ones for a period of time. I think that was raised at Gettysburg by Giuliani or something like that. But it kept on being repeated, and I found it annoying because it didn't seem that it was right. So I called McSwain, and he got back to me. He said, "No, the problem is that Mastriano threw out this number, and what he did was he mixed apples and oranges. He took the number of applications for the Republican primary and he compared it to the number of absentee votes cast in the general election. But once you actually go and look and compare apples to apples, there's no discrepancy at all." And that's one of the. I think at some point I covered that with the president.
It is common for those
Okay, well, you're on microphone.
We have another witness here today
Remember
who
that
has
humans
detailed
survived
knowledge
this
about
way
the
for
election
millennia.
process in
You
Philadelphia.
can too.
Mr. Schmidt, at the time of the 2020 presidential election, you were serving as the only Republican member of Philadelphia's three-member city commission, which is responsible for overseeing elections throughout the city. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So President Trump made numerous claims regarding fraudulent voting practices in Philadelphia, including the claim that dead people were voting. In fact, Mr. Giuliani told Pennsylvania state legislators that 8,000 dead people voted in Pennsylvania. You investigated those claims of voter fraud. Can you tell us what you found?
Not only was there not evidence of 8,000 dead voters voting in Pennsylvania, there was evidence of. We took seriously every case that was referred to us. No matter how fantastical, no matter how absurd, and we took every one of those seriously, including these.
As it turns out, even Mr. Trump's campaign lawyers knew that the dead voter claims weren't valid.
I guess the crooks in Philadelphia are disappointed in this. They only submitted 8,021 ballots from dead people, mail-in ballots for dead people. Probably easier for dead people to submit mail-in ballots than it is to vote in person.
Rudy was, at this stage of his life, in the same ability to manage things at this level or not. And obviously, I think Bernie Kerik publicly said it. They never proved the allegations that they were making, and they were trying to develop.
Mr. Schmidt, on November 11th, 2020, President Trump tweeted about you, saying, and here's a quote, "A guy named Al Schmidt, Philadelphia commissioner and so-called Republican for running, is being used big time by the fake news media to explain how honest things were with respect to the election in Philadelphia. He refuses to look at a mountain of corruption, dishonesty. We win." As a result of that tweet and the CNN interview you gave where you stated the dead voter claims in Pennsylvania were false, you and your staff were subjected to disturbing threats. Can you tell us about that?
The threats prior to that tweet, and on some level it feels almost silly to talk about a tweet, but we can really see the impact that they have, because prior to that, the threats were pretty general in nature. Corrupt election officials in Philadelphia are going to get what's coming to them, or what the Second Amendment is for. Walking into the lion's den, all sorts of things like that. After the president tweeted at me by name, calling me out the way that he did, the threats became much more specific, much more graphic, and included not just me by name, but included members of my family, my name, their ages, our address, pictures of our home, just every bit of detail that you could imagine. That was what changed with that tweet.
Behind me are redacted threats that you received, that you provided to the committee. Now, we redacted portions of the text to protect your family. Mr. Schmidt, I think I speak for all of my colleagues when I say we are deeply sorry for what you and your loved ones have been through. And I also want to thank you for your service to your country and for standing up for the rule of law. I want to thank both Mr. Pack and Mr. Schmidt for their service, their testimony, and for standing up for the rule of law. Now I'd like to turn to another subject. Courts in our country provide a legitimate venue for campaigns to challenge what they view as irregular election practices. Now, courts have the final say in how the law applies to those campaigns. We have a renowned legal expert here to address the Trump campaign's activities in court. Mr. Ginsburg, you've spent your entire career representing Republicans in election-related litigation. You served as the National Counsel on Republican presidential campaigns in 2000, 2004. Played a key role in the 2000 Florida recount that led to the Supreme Court's decision in Bush v. Gore. You served as the co-chair of the Presidential Commission on Election Administration. I think it's fair to say you're the most prominent Republican lawyer who's litigated in the election field. Now, you've analyzed the Trump campaign's litigation pretty carefully. What's the normal process in post-election litigation? How was the Trump campaign different from the kinds of post-election litigation you've been in?
In the normal course of things, any campaign on the night of the election and the days after will do a couple of different things. One is that they'll analyze precinct results to look for abnormalities in the results, and they'll send people to those precincts to ask more questions. All campaigns will have poll watchers, workers, and observers in the polling. So campaigns will talk to those people if they saw any irregularities that could cause problems in the election. Now, the Trump campaign talked pre-election about having 50,000 poll workers. So presumably, they did have eyes on the ground in all these places. And so in the normal course of things, the campaign will analyze the reports that come in. The Trump campaign had a couple of basic problems, however. Number one, the 2020 election was not close. In 2000, that was 537 close. In this election, the most narrow margin was 10,000 something in Arizona, and you just don't make up those sorts of numbers in recounts. And when the claims of fraud and irregularities were made, you've heard very compelling testimony from Mr. Stepien, from Matt Morgan, from Alex Cannon about those claims and how they didn't believe them. So that put the Trump campaign on sort of a process of bringing cases without the actual evidence that you have to have in which the process is designed to bring it.
So are you aware of any instance in which a court found Trump campaign's fraud claims to be credible?
No, there was never that instance. In all the cases that were brought in, I've looked at more than 60 that include more than 180 counts. And no, the simple fact is that the Trump campaign did not make its case.
The Select Committee has identified 62 post-election lawsuits filed by the Trump campaign and his allies between November 4th, 2020 and January 6th, 2021. Those cases resulted in 61 losses and only a single victory, which actually didn't affect the outcome for either candidate. Despite those 61 losses, President Trump and his allies claim that the courts refused to hear them out, and as a result, they never had their day in court. Mr. Ginsburg, what do you say about the claims that Mr. Trump wasn't given an opportunity to provide the evidence they had of voter fraud? Did they have their day in court?
They did have their day in court. About half of those cases that you mentioned were dismissed at the procedural stage. for a lack of standing, the proper people didn't bring the case, or there wasn't sufficient evidence and it got dismissed on a motion to dismiss. But in the other, there was discussion of the merits that was contained in the complaint.
Aurora, we're approaching the
In
planet
no
now.
instance
We have a landing site for you that's...
find that the charges
well, it's better than the
are
alternatives.
real.
We've
It's
sent you the
also worth
coordinates.
noting that even if
It'll
the
take us a
company
couple of days to align our orbit. Should be able to establish direct contact with you during that time. Then we're coming in to get you. Cross your fingers, the weather holds. Don't leave us waiting.
Those range
Sunbeam
from
out.
the farcical Cyber Ninjas case in Arizona
What?
to the Michigan Senate report that was mentioned earlier, the hand
No,
recount
I
in
just opened it up.
Georgia, that Mr. Pack addressed.
I got
In
40
each
minutes.
one of those instances, there was no credible evidence of fraud produced by the Trump campaign or his supporters.
Thank you. Now, as Mr. Ginsburg has explained, there are no cases where the Trump campaign was able to convince a court that there was widespread fraud or irregularities in the 2020 election. Over and over, judges, appointed by Democrats and Republicans alike, directly refuted this false narrative. They called out the Trump campaign's lack of evidence for its claims, and the judges did that even in cases where they could have simply thrown out the lawsuit without writing a word. You can see behind me a few excerpts from the decisions in these 62 cases. The Trump campaign's lack of evidence was criticized by judges across the political spectrum. In Pennsylvania, a Trump-appointed judge concluded, quote, "Charges require specific allegations and proof. We have neither here." Another Trump-appointed judge warned that if cases like these succeeded, quote, "Any disappointed loser in a presidential election able to hire a team of clever lawyers could flag claimed deviations from election results and cast doubt on election results." The list goes on and on. Allegations are called, quote, "an amalgamation of theories, conjecture, and speculation." In another, strained legal arguments without merit, unsupported by evidence, derived from wholly unreliable sources, a fundamental and obvious misreading of the Constitution. The rejection of President Trump's litigation efforts was overwhelming. 22 federal judges appointed by Republican presidents, including 10 appointed by President Trump himself, and at least 24 elected or appointed Republican state judges dismissed the president's claims. At least 11 lawyers have been referred for disciplinary proceedings due to bad faith and baseless efforts to undermine the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. Rudy Giuliani had his license to practice law suspended in New York, and just this week, a newly filed complaint will potentially make his suspension from practicing law in D.C. permanent. And as we've just heard from perhaps the most preeminent Republican election lawyer in recent history, the Trump campaign's unprecedented effort to overturn its election laws was a deeply damaging abuse of the judicial process, as stated by U.S. District Court Judge David Carter. This was, quote, "a coup in search of a legal theory." Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. The members of the Select Committee may have additional questions for today's witnesses, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Without objection, members will be permitted 10 business days to submit statements for the record, including opening remarks and additional questions for the witnesses. The second panel of witnesses is now dismissed. Without
Report,
objection, the
Captain.
chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for a closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now that we understand the litigation efforts by President Trump and his allies, I'd like to present additional actions taken by the Trump campaign during this time. President Trump continued to push the stolen election narrative, even though he and his allies knew that their litigation efforts, making the same claim, had failed. It's worth pointing out that litigation generally does not continue past the safe harbor date of December 14th. But the fact that this litigation went on, well, that decision makes more sense when you consider the Trump campaign's fundraising tactics. Because if the litigation had stopped on December 14th, there would have been no fight to defend the election and no clear path to continue to raise millions of dollars. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd ask for unanimous consent to include in the record a video presentation describing how President Trump used the lies he told to raise millions of dollars from the American people. These fundraising schemes were also part of the effort to disseminate the false claims of election fraud.
Without objection, so.
My name is Amanda Wick, and I'm Senior Investigative Counsel with the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. Between Election Day and January 6th, the Trump campaign sent millions of fundraising emails to Trump supporters, sometimes as many as 25 a day. The emails claimed the, quote, left-wing mob was undermining the election, implored supporters to, quote, step up to protect the integrity of the election, and encouraged them to, quote, fight back. But as the Select Committee has demonstrated, the Trump campaign knew these claims of voter fraud were false, yet they continued to barrage small-dollar donors with emails, encouraging them to donate to something called the Official Election Defense Fund. The Select Committee discovered no such fund existed.
I don't believe there is actually a fund called the Election Defense Fund.
Is it fair to say that Election Defense Fund was another, I think we called it a marketing tactic? Yes. And tell us about these funds as marketing tactics.
Just topic matter, where money could potentially go to be, how money could potentially be used.
The claims that the election was stolen were so successful, President Trump and his allies raised $250 million, nearly $100 million in the first week after the election. On November 9th, 2020, President Trump created a separate entity called the Save America PAC. Most of the money raised went to this newly created PAC, not to election-related litigation. The Select Committee discovered that the Save America PAC made millions of dollars of contributions to pro-Trump organizations, including $1 million to Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' charitable foundation, $1 million to the America First Policy Institute, a conservative organization which employs several former Trump administration officials, $204,857 to the Trump Hotel Collection, and over $5 million to Event Strategies Inc., the company that ran President Trump's January 6th rally on the Ellipse.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing.
The evidence developed by the Select Committee highlights how the Trump campaign aggressively pushed false election claims to fundraise, telling supporters it would be used to fight voter fraud that did not exist. The emails continued through January 6th, even as President Trump spoke on the Ellipse. 30 minutes after the last fundraising email was sent, the Capitol was breached.
Every American is entitled and encouraged to participate in our electoral process. Political fundraising is part of that. Small dollar donors use scarce disposable income to support candidates and causes of their choosing, to make their voices heard. And those donors deserve the truth about what those funds will be used for. Throughout the committee's investigation, we found evidence that the Trump campaign and its surrogates misled donors as to where their funds would go and what they would be used for. So not only was it was the big ripoff. Donors deserve to know where their funds are really going. They deserve better than what President Trump and his team did. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney, for a closing statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank all of our witnesses today. And I'd also like to, in particular, wish Mr. Stepien and his family all the best on the arrival of a new baby. Today's hearing, Mr. Chairman, was very narrowly focused. And in the coming days, you will see the committee move on to President Trump's broader planning for January 6th, including his plan to corrupt the Department of Justice, and his detailed planning with lawyer John Eastman to pressure the Vice President, state legislatures, state officials, and others to overturn the election. Let me leave you today with one clip to preview what you will see in one of our hearings to come. This is the testimony of White House lawyer Eric Hirschman. John Eastman called Mr. Hirschman the day after January 6th, and here is how that conversation went.
I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind?" Right? Said I only want to hear two words coming out of your mouth from now on. Orderly transition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
At the conclusion of last week's hearing, we showed you a video of rioters explaining why they had come to Washington on January 6th. It was because Donald Trump told them to be here. Today we heard about some of the lies Donald Trump embraced and amplified when it became clear he didn't have the numbers of votes to win the election. We heard about how officials at different levels of government explored claims of fraud and found no evidence. Yet the former president continued to repeat those false claims over and over again. Today, we'll end things where we did on Thursday, back on January 6th, hearing words of individuals who wanted to stop the transfer of power. We know they were there because of Donald Trump. Now we hear some of the things they believed. Without objection, I enter into the record a video presentation.
I know exactly what's going on right now. Fake election. They think they're gonna fucking cheat us out of our vote and put communist fucking Biden in office. It ain't fucking happening today, buddy. You voted?
Yes, sir.
How'd it go?
Voted early. It went well, except for the can't really trust the software. Dominion software all over it.
We voted, and right in the top right-hand corner of the Dominion voting machine that we used, there was a Wi-Fi symbol with 5 bars. So that's most definitely connected to it, without a doubt. So they stole that from us twice. We're not doing it anymore. We're not taking it anymore. So we're standing up, we're here, and whatever happens, we're not laying down again.
I'm from Pennsylvania. It didn't work. It absolutely worked. It didn't work. No. Trust the system. 200,000 people that weren't even registered voted. 430,000 votes disappeared from President Trump's tally. And you can't stand there and tell me that it worked.
I don't want to say that what we're doing is right. But if the election's being stolen, what is it going to take?
The chair requests those in the hearing room remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted members from the room. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
What? Yes, it is. subside. Watch what? Turn the PlayStation on and watch.
I can put my headphones in.
Welcome aboard, Captain.
All systems online.
Integrating new PDA data.
Turn it down a little bit, please. Would you guys leave each other alone, please? What? Scary, why? How?
Detecting massive energy signature in the region. Cannot identify it.
And this one's just pretty bad. It's right above me, so I'm not like too concerned. Oh, there's a warper right there. I'll show you. Well, he was up over here. Nope, there he is. That's a warper. It is very creepy. What?
Self-scan complete. Foreign bacteria counters reached statistically significant levels. No adverse effects detected. Be vigilant for symptoms.
I don't have below zero. Like I said, I'm right here. I scanned it already. Shit, I didn't know there was an underwater cave here. No, I haven't.
Passing 100 meters. Oxygen efficiency decreased. New blueprint acquired.
Oh, cyclops.
Yeah. So I got the hull and I got the engine, and I need 2 more bridge parts and I can build the Cyclops. 6.5 minutes. I got 6 minutes, 3 minutes really to go through this this place.
Scans indicate this structure is composed of a metal alloy with unprecedented integrity. No match is found in database. Performing structural analysis. Unknown language. Attempting translation.
Oh, I think it's Russian. Oh, I know what that says. I think it says Russian in Russian.
Your best probability of interfacing with this facility is achieved by accessing the control room in the lower section.
Oh, what's that?
It's an ion
Analysis
cube.
of the patterns on the walls cannot ascertain whether their purpose is aesthetic or functional. Further data required. Unknown language. Attempting translation.
There's not. You have the stasis rifle, which is really the only kind of rifle But you also have a gravity gun, which lets you yank things around. Alright, 2.5 minutes and counting.
See that dot next to the moon? Pretty sure that's the sun. Bro, the clouds are moving so fast in this game. Look, it's the sunbeam.
I farted.
There's a little sunbeam.
Wait, how did the moon go from over there to here? What?
I don't know, man. Don't know.
What the?
Couple more minutes.
Out the birdie.
No, that's the sunbeam.
What's today? What's today's date?
I think the 13th.
5 more days. 5 more days for what?
So I can go to my friend's birthday. That was the birdie.
It's the sunbeam.
15 seconds in counting.
Oh, got it.
Oh, there it is.
Survivor, we see you. Man, I don't know how you held out down there. We broke an atmosphere, and we're descending towards the landing site. Is that a building down there? What do you mean you can't identify it? Hold on. No turning back now. Positions, everyone. Touching down in 10, 9, 8. It's coming from the building? Change course. Set thrusters to full.
Well, there went my ride.
Now you have to look for the parts that are on the map. No, he does. So that he's gonna look for it.
I didn't finish exploring down here. I've already done multiple cell scans. Mm-hmm. I'm infected. That's the archway, is the portal, yeah. I need to get to the other side where there is an ion cube port, and then I put the ion cube in. It's a doomsday device.
Scans indicate the facility's control room lies beyond this doorway.
Oh my god.
What is that?
It's a biter. Ow! Ow! They bite. No.
The control panel is broadcasting a message. Translation reads, "Warning, infected individuals may not disable the weapon. This planet is under quarantine." Translating background broadcast. Downloading summary to databank.
Oh no, it was already like that. Where, what, when, who, why, when? Huh? I don't know. Are we? Warbird. Guys, don't. Huh. Yeah, it was a shark.
Welcome aboard, Captain.
Sounds like it's right. Watch the water. Sound like right. What you mean? Water is blue. I see two eyes. Oh my god. Oh yeah, that's there.
Warning, maximum depth reached. Hull damage imminent.
I know, one of those sharks.
Erosion patterns on the land masses suspended here suggest they once floated on the surface.
I saw something go like this. Oh! Be careful when you see dogs down there, because they will do. Radiation. Like this. 1,000 meters away from the sun. It's not. Oh. Wait, that's part of the sunbeam.
It's not part of the sunbeam. It's part of the aurora.
Yeah, the one that he was up before.
I think I already went through this one.
New blueprint acquired. New blueprint acquired. New blueprint acquired. New blueprint acquired.
Yeah, I'm walking a lot of stuff. Where is that? Stab the remote. Oh, a data box. Yeah, it was like that back then. Remember the big box? Elevator needs oxygen and the building. Retrace these steps.
Seek fluid intake.
Bad guy, please be like, remain calm. We are only here to kidnap you.
Passing 100 meters. Oxygen efficiency decreased. New blueprint acquired. New blueprint acquired.
Propulsion cannon.
think I'm done here, but let's check it one more time.
There was like this place at the end.
Vital signs stabilizing.
Yeah, go down the hall straight away. You should see something. I'm gonna kidnap. Wait, go. No, not that way. Not that way. Not that way. Not that way.
Already? You mean up? Because I already went up that way.
No, there was like a vent. Go outside. Yeah, go back to the entrance. Yeah, go back to the entrance of the ship. Go to the entrance of the ship.
Okay.
Never again.
Where?
Get your look at somebody.
I mean down here somewhere? Oh, this vent?
Passing 100 meters. Oxygen efficiency decreased.
There. Yeah, that vent. Yeah, no. Get your boo-boo cock and look yourself back in the forefront. Bro! You made me poo. You made me poo. Get your toes off me. Get your toes off me. Back seating allowed. Permadeath, hard mode, back seating allowed, English. What, hard mode? Permadeath! Get your poo-poo cock and look yourself up, bro. Get your doodle stay and look yourself out of here before I fold you. Get your poo-poo cock up and get out of here.
Welcome aboard, Captain.
You're on me. No.
Guys, come on.
Passing 100 meters. Oxygen efficiency decreased.
We want milky.
I've already done this
Maybe
one.
want milky. Don't get milky. We want milk. I'm on. You stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
You stop it.
Stop it.
Alright, well, guys, I got the modification stations I needed so I can make some depth modules and whatnot. We can take this thing further.
Then woo woo wawa.
Welcome aboard, Captain.
Do dada. Do mama.
Stop it.
Stop it. He said stop. He only said it. He said no.
Please, please, stop it.
Stop it. You stop it. Stop it. I'm your enemy. Get off my side. I'm not on your side. I'm on your enemy. What? Thank you. No, I'm on your side. Yeah, today. You're too bad. My team's way too good for you. My team's way too good for you. Your team has leverage. My team has leverage. You know what? When I asked, my team has straight up cock and heat, and you have flashing off with me. I don't have anything. I'm just a part of the group by one man. You know how I feel. Ow!
Guys,
Ow!
put the bed up now. Both of you, get your asses up. Put the bed up now. Put the bed up now. Both of you, get your asses up. Put the bed up now.
I sleep. Tell anybody to wait. Wait.
Welcome aboard, Captain.
Welcome aboard, Captain. All systems online.
Biodiversity in this region is unusually low. Cause unknown. Passing 100 meters. Oxygen efficiency decreased. Passing 200 meters. Oxygen efficiency greatly decreased. New blueprint acquired. New blueprint acquired. New blueprint acquired.
Welcome aboard, Captain.
New blueprint acquired. New blueprint acquired. New blueprint acquired. Signal location uploaded to PDA. Integrating new PDA data. Integrating new PDA data. Vital signs stabilizing.
Welcome aboard, Captain. Welcome aboard, Captain.
Welcome aboard, Captain.
All systems online.
Terra HQ. This may be your only communications window. We can't send a rescue ship all the way out there, so Aurora, you're just gonna have to meet us halfway. We've uploaded blueprints to the ship's computer.
Sandwich run, you in?
Yeah, give me a second. Black box data shows the high-security terminal in the captain's quarters is still functional.
Becky's leaving like in 5 minutes.
All right, tell Becky I'll just take the regular.
The regular?
Yeah, she'll know what I mean. The code should be...
If she doesn't?
Just tell her the regular, dude.
Okay.
The
if
code...
I say regular, she's like, what's the regular? Come all the way back up here.
The code should be 2679. The regular's just a ham and cheese.
Okay, would you just say ham and cheese?
Ham and cheese.
Okay.
systems online. Welcome aboard, Captain.
Welcome aboard, Captain. Seek fluid intake. New blueprint acquired. Welcome aboard, Captain. fluid intake immediately. Vital signs stabilizing.